Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Masterclass Explainer on AQA Topic 3.2.1, all about human resource data. If you're looking to really level up your exam technique and genuinely understand how businesses measure the true value of their people, well, you're in exactly the right place. We're going to treat this session with the rigorous formal approach it absolutely deserves, giving you the exact tools you need to analyze and evaluate HR data like a total pro. So looking at our agenda for this explainer, we've got 4 main sections. We'll kick things off with the significance of HR data, then move into quantitative mastery, step it up a notch to advanced data analysis, and finally wrap up with strategic decision-making. Let's get to it! Section 1. The significance of HR data. Right, so before we even think about touching a calculator, we really need to grasp the strategic value this data holds for a business. This is our first step up the ladder into Assessment Objective 1, or AO1. Look, numbers on a page, they're totally meaningless unless we actually understand the human behaviors they represent. Now, what's really interesting here is that employee engagement isn't just some fluffy concept about, workplace happiness. According to the AQA spec, it's defined as the level of commitment, motivation, and emotional investment employees have in their work and organization. Make no mistake, this is a hard-hitting operational metric. High engagement directly influences performance. It drives up labor productivity, and it cements employee loyalty. To put that into perspective, industry studies frequently show that replacing just one single lost employee can cost a business anywhere from 1/2 to 2 times their annual salary. So yeah, engagement is a massive financial priority. To manage all this effectively, HR managers rely on a really comprehensive dashboard of metrics. They're looking at employee representation and diversity to ensure a solid breadth of backgrounds and skills. They track employee well-being, and that means physical and mental health, plus things like flexible working. They also zoom in on role-specific key performance indicators, or KPIs. And, absolutely crucially, they're constantly monitoring turnover, retention rates, and labor productivity. By keeping a close eye on these precise metrics, they can make sure the business has the right skills in the exact right numbers to actually achieve its broader strategic goals. Moving on to Section 2, Quantitative Mastery. All right, it's time to shift gears into our AO2 application. Listen, mastering these formulas is absolutely non-negotiable for success. You've got to commit these essential AQA calculations to memory. First up, labor turnover percentage. That's your staff leaving divided by average staff employed times 100. Second is employee productivity, which is total output divided by the number of employees. Third, sales per employee. Pretty straightforward. Total sales divided by the number of employees. And finally, employee costs as a percentage of revenue, which is employee costs divided by revenue times 100. Oh, and remember, when you're sitting in that exam hall, the own figure rule applies. That means displaying clear step-by-step workings is absolutely crucial. Even if your final calculation goes a bit sideways, you can still pick up marks for correctly interpreting your own figure later on. It's a real lifesaver. Let's put this into some real context, shall we? Take a look at this data for a fictional business we'll call Far More Cycles, an independent UK bike retailer. Notice how their revenue slightly drops from 1.9 million down to 1.88 million pounds between 2023 and 2024. But at the exact same time, their total number of employees actually increases from 30 up to 32. This right here is the perfect setup for our quantitative application. So, we've got a simplified data table for Far More Cycles showing output, total employees, and staff leaving for those 2 consecutive years. Here's what I want you to do. Calculate the employee productivity for both 2023 and 2024. Once you've got that, calculate the percentage change in employee turnover between those 2 years. Go ahead, pause the video now, and complete task 1. Okay, let's look at another really critical figure from that Far More Cycles data. By 2024, their employee costs as a percentage of revenue rose to 27%. So the crucial point is this. When a business sees its labor costs eating up a higher percentage of its falling revenue, it directly compresses operating profit margins. In Far More's case, we actually know their operating profit margins fell from 3% down to just 2%. It's a prime example of how this single metric can expose a massive vulnerability in a business. Which brings us to Section 3, Advanced Data Analysis. We're stepping up the ladder now to AO3 because, let's be honest, raw numbers mean absolutely nothing unless you can actually identify the trends, understand the wider context, and analyze the business impacts using things like index numbers and percentage changes. Treat this visual like a real-world manager's dashboard. We're seeing a really clear 3-year trend here. Employee engagement scores are steadily falling, while labor turnover percentages are correspondingly rising. And this brilliantly illustrates the visual and operational relationship between a soft HR metric, like engagement, and a hard metric, like turnover. One inevitably drives the other.
And that brings us right to your second challenge. Using this dashboard trend, how could the strong correlation between falling engagement and rising turnover signal a decline in long-term operational efficiency? Think carefully about things like recruitment costs, the loss of skilled talent, and the ultimate impact on unit costs. All right, pause the video now and complete test 2. Now, if you're aiming for top marks for AO3 analysis, your chain of reasoning needs to look exactly like this. Step 1. Low engagement decreases worker motivation and loyalty. Step 2. This directly drives up employee turnover, which in turn spikes recruitment and training costs. Step 3. The continual onboarding of new, less experienced staff lowers overall labor productivity. And finally, Step 4. Lower productivity mathematically increases average unit costs, fundamentally damaging the firm's competitiveness in the market. Boom. That is exactly how you rigorously link a soft human metric to cold, hard operational reality. Moving to our final section, Section 4, Strategic Decision-Making. We have officially reached the peak of our ladder, AO4. Scoring top marks here requires you to evaluate data, comparing different metrics to inform complex workforce planning and actually propose strategic HR improvements. Look at this comparison between two really sophisticated concepts. On one side, we have sales per employee, which is a vital measure that focuses heavily on revenue generation and individual output efficiency. On the other side, we have employee costs as a percentage of revenue, which zeroes in on cost control, financial efficiency, and protecting those profit margins. An outstanding business analyst, they know exactly when to prioritize one over the other.
Which perfectly sets up your final, highest-level challenge. To what extent is sales per employee a more reliable predictor of long-term competitiveness than employee costs as a percentage of revenue, specifically for a high-growth service business? You'll need to weigh up the arguments for both sides and justify your ultimate strategic judgment based on that specific high-growth context. Go ahead, pause the video now, and complete task 3. So let's look at how all this translates into real-world action. Because HR managers don't just sit around staring at dashboards all day. They use this data to execute strategic actions. They might refine their talent acquisition strategies to put a stop to high turnover. They could implement rigorous employee appraisals to identify and close skills gaps. Maybe they restructure the organization through delayering or redeploying staff just to improve that sales per employee figure. Or they might adjust rewards, using performance-related pay or job enrichment to fix those low engagement scores we talked about.
We've spent this entire masterclass crunching the numbers and analyzing the data, but I want to leave you with a rather provocative thought. Can standard financial reporting ever truly capture the value of non-financial factors? I'm talking about things like employee morale, well-being, an inclusive culture, and brand reputation. The numbers absolutely tell us what is happening on the factory floor or in the office, but it's understanding the humans behind that data that tells us why. Thanks for joining this explainer. Keep practicing those formulas and always question the story behind the data.